This show is produced by the Hartman Media Company. For more information and links to all our great podcasts, visit hartmanmedia.com.
The last few months have affirmed something you said years ago that was just so true, and I don't think people appreciated it at the time, is that the mortgage is an asset. But now, given where interest rates are now, to think, oh man, I got this sub 3% mortgage. Why would I ever sell? It's tremendous. It's much more valuable than the house itself.
Welcome to the Creating Wealth Show with Jason Hartman. You're about to learn a new slant on investing, some exciting techniques, and fresh new approaches to the world's most historically proven asset class that will enable you to create more wealth and freedom than you ever thought possible. Jason is a genuine self-made multimillionaire who's actually been there and done it. He's a successful investor, lender, developer, and entrepreneur who's owned properties in 11 states, had hundreds of tenants, and been involved in thousands of real estate transactions. This program will help you follow in Jason's footsteps on the road to your financial independence day. You really can do it. And now, here's your host, Jason Hartman, with the complete solution for real estate investors.
Welcome, empowered investors. This is episode 2131. Our guest today will be Bill Faeth, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But first, we have got to talk about how extremely special the U.S. real estate market is, special in all the world. Here's why. If you're watching on video, you can see this amazing chart from our friends at Resi Club, and Lance Lambert is booked on the show, so he's coming on soon, and we'll talk to him about a whole bunch of his great research. But look at this chart. It's absolutely amazing. It's talking about what the mortgage market composition is by country, and it takes several examples of several different countries, and it looks at the amount of variable rate mortgages versus the amount of fixed rate mortgages. Now, you know, for a long time, we've been talking about the lock-in effect of all these people with these extremely cheap, extremely long fixed rate mortgages. And the US is unique in all the world when it comes to the length of these mortgages. Nothing new there. If you've been following my work over the last 20 years, you know, we've talked about that a lot. But what's interesting to look at is how specific this gets. And I'm going to share with you some examples. Finland, 95%, and I'm just going to round off here for speed, 95% of the mortgages in Finland are variable rate mortgages. In Australia, down under, throw a shrimp on the Barbie, because 74% of the mortgages there are variable rate mortgages. Now, this chart breaks it down into variable rate, in other words, only fixed for 1 year at a time, typical adjustable rate mortgage, or short-term fixed, which is 1 to 5 years fixed, right? Like in our friends up north in Canada, take off, to the great white north. Okay. I love calling it Canada, ruled by the dictator Justin Trudeau. Yes, he is a disgusting dictator. They have these not variable rate mortgages necessarily, but they're only fixed for 5 years. Then you have to renegotiate the mortgage. Okay, so it breaks down differently. Now, a medium-term fixed is 5 to 10 years, and then a long-term fixed is over 10 years. Now, you know, the vast majority of the people in the United States have fixed for 30 years. And all the people that got the cheap mortgages during the COVID era have 27, maybe even 28 years left. We're kind of leaving that 28-year mark now, but they have 27 years left, definitely. Okay, so Australia, 25.9% of the mortgages are 1 to 5 years fixed. That's not very long in the way we look at it here in the US. Ireland, 56% of the mortgages are variable rate, and Sweden, 48% variable rate. Italy, 17% variable rate. Now you might think, oh, well, those Italians have it made. Hey, they certainly got La Dolce Vita. But the Italians have 83% of the mortgages that are only 1 to 5 year fixed. So I don't even call that a fixed rate mortgage. If you're in the US, you wouldn't call it that either. The only thing you call a fixed rate mortgage is a good old fashioned 30-year fixed rate mortgages. In the UK, our friends over there have 19% variable rate and 79% fixed for only 1 to 5 years. That's what the Brits have. All right. Canada? I know, I really know it's called Canada, but I like Canada. Okay, so they have 21% variable rate and then 32% that are 1 to 5 year fixed and 47% that are 5 to 10 year fixed. And I would venture to say, because what I understand about the Canadian real estate market is that really those are only on that short side of that, what he calls medium term. In other words, they're only 5 years fixed. Okay, Germany stacks up very, very badly. The US, though, wow, the US has a tiny percentage. In fact, it's such a small percentage, the chart doesn't even list the percentage in there of variable rate mortgages. And the rest is long-term fixed rate at 96.4% long-term fixed rate. Now, actually, the frogs, the French, okay, with their great culture, they have 96.2% fixed rate for over 10 years. But I'll bet you they very rarely have anything that's approaching 20 or 30 years fixed, right? They're just over 10 years, right? That's all you have to do to qualify as the long-term fixed rate mortgage here. So you see how in the US, we have a very unique real estate market because of those government-sponsored entities, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, et cetera, et cetera. You could go into all the rest of them too. There's many more, the USDA, yada, yada. But Fannie and Freddie are the big ones. Okay, so that's really interesting. What does that mean? Well, it means that there's just no urgency to sell, no urgency to move. So we've talked about that before on many prior episodes. All right, I would be remiss if we did not talk about one more time, we've got to talk about the real estate industry here for a moment, folks, because this affects you. It affects so many of us. Real estate is such a big industry. And you know, I reported previously on the mega giant NAR, National Association of Realtors, and many other real estate firms also, not just the association, the trade association, NAR, but the other big real estate firms, RE/MAX, Keller Williams, et cetera, were all included in this mega giant commission lawsuit. And they were accused of antitrust violations, fixing prices, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I don't really think they were fixing prices, okay? But in practice, we all know the way it worked. And this whole discussion, we could discuss this for hours and hours. So just understand that I am not going to do it justice. There's no way in our limited time I can do it justice. But this has huge, wide-ranging impacts on the real estate industry, a giant industry, and on you potentially. So it's all going to shake out. Everybody is just in chaos mode here because they just don't know how it's all going to shake out. But of course, yours truly has some opinions about it, and I'll bet you I'm going to be right. Again, I'm going to be right about something else, which is pretty common for me to be right. Okay, so I know. I probably need to eat some humble pie. Well, I'll get that after I record this, okay? So we'll see. So anyway, look, on Friday, the big news was that the National Association of Realtors settled this looming antitrust suit. The original verdict was $1.8 billion. That's with a B, $1 billion, but that's treble damages because of antitrust. So it was really well over $5 billion, right? Now, they settled it. They settled it on Friday for $418 million. That's $500 million. So I guess that means all the lawsuits will stop now, but I don't know how they're going to pay that money. They don't have that much money, so I'm sure there was a payment plan, and we'll see how that all shakes out. But this little news clip from one of my newsletters says, settled its antitrust lawsuit, paying $418 million in damages and eliminating its agents' standard 6% commissions. Well, let me tell you, folks, for someone who was an NAR member for 19 years, okay, I was a member of NAR, there was no fixed commission. The plaintiff's attorneys, they got the jury to believe that, but it never was true, right? I never saw any evidence of fixing commissions or anyone ever at a conference or a meeting stand up and say, you have to charge 6% commission. Never happened. I didn't hear that one time in my whole career as a traditional real estate agent. But in practice, we know that there was this kind of like implied thing that you start the negotiating at 6%, right? And then go down from there. Now, 100 years ago, when houses were super cheap and they weren't financed a lot of times because they weren't backed by these government-sponsored entities, 6% was probably a reasonable commission. But over the years, real estate appreciated many times much faster than the rate of inflation. And somehow that 6% thing stuck. And it was paid on debt and equity. And this is where the commissions really got out of hand and too high. Okay. I know my industry peers, and I'm not really in that industry anymore, so this doesn't like affect us the same way as it does other people in that business. But my sort of semi-peers in the real estate industry hate me for saying this, but they don't listen to the whole thing. They don't take the whole context. I do think the commissions really are too high. However, they have to be that high because it's such an absurd, dysfunctional industry where all of these people in real estate have to spend this massive amount of money on marketing. You see it everywhere. Now, if the commissions went down to a more reasonable level and they didn't have to spend all that money on marketing, the flock of agents would thin out and there would be less competition, and people would, in a more proper way, focus on their craft of selling real estate, negotiating deals, and advising their clients on how to better invest and how to better manage their real estate and contract for their real estate and choose their real estate and all the things that they do, right? But that has been left way behind because the commissions got so high that everybody and their brother, unqualified people, got into the business because there's a lot of money there. Just like, when there was a gold rush in California, right? Everybody moved to California to go find gold, right? And it just becomes this dysfunctional thing. And the real estate industry got very dysfunctional, okay? So this little blip says the move, which could upturn the current real estate model, is expected to immediately reduce the cost of home buying from absurdly unattainable to just a normal level of unattainable. Well, I don't really think that's going to happen in any significant way. What they're basically saying is that if, for example, and this is not fixed by law, but if, for example, in the MLS system, an agent was paid 2.5%. They used to be paid 3% all the time, right? But, over the years that came down. And so say they were paid 2.5%, and now they're only paid 1%. So an extra 1.5%, the assertion here, unsaid, is that, well, the seller could now reduce their price by 1.5%, or the buyer could pay 1.5% less. Well, the likely reality of this is that the sellers aren't reducing their prices because they're still looking at all the comps of the prior sales, and they're still going to want as much money as they can get. Maybe the buyer and seller, because the price of the commission is built into any product, not just real estate, it's built into every product we ever buy. There's always middlemen, commission, supply chains, yada, yada, right? Now, maybe what they do is they end up splitting the difference. So maybe the buyer pays 0.75% more for the house than if there were no commission in there, and the seller is willing to accept 0.75% less for the house. Maybe that happens, but I don't know. Much more significant things are at play here, though, folks. Okay, now here's another article. It says, find buyers before the agents. Mortgage industry reacts to the NAR settlement. The NAR settlement will give loan officers a more significant role in the home buying process and encourage housing pros to pursue dual licensing, experts said. And I do believe this will happen. So I agree, this is coming. But on the flip side of that, it's going to cause realtors to get into the mortgage business. So what you're going to see is a lot more dual licensing, where instead of the real estate agent just having a real estate license and the loan officer just having a loan officer's license, you're going to see all of these parties get both licenses. So for the licensing people, they're going to make a lot more money. And they're going to try and bundle these services and offer them both together. Now, buyers of real estate are going to be signing buyer-broker agreements, which I actually think is a good thing for both consumers and for real estate agents. Because what will happen here is it will make the buyer more committed to the real estate agent, and it'll make the real estate agent more committed to the buyer because they'll have an actual contract together. And this will be good for both of them. They will become more equally yoked. Okay. Remember that very important biblical concept of being equally yoked. And the problem, one of the many problems with the very dysfunctional real estate industry, is that the buyers and the real estate agents were not equally yoked. The buyer could just waste the agent's time. So the agent didn't know if they were going to have a deal or have a buyer or not. And they were just kind of wasting time throwing spam at the buyer, essentially, hoping they'll buy. And the buyer could be totally disloyal to the agent. So why would the agent ever commit to them? I mean, look, it's like a marriage, folks. If your wife wants an open marriage and wants to sleep with whoever she wants, and you want a traditional marriage as the man, and you're only going to sleep with your wife, well, then no one's going to do that deal, right? Because they're not equally yoked, right? No one's going to agree to that deal. At least only an idiot man would agree to that deal. Okay. So anyway, before we get off on a big tangent here, let's move on. Now, here is another really important component about this commission lawsuit. Now, this is from a different article, but I just clipped this part. A chance for industry-wide consolidation. See, what's going to happen here, my prediction, is that the MLS, the long-standing multiple listing service, is going to be just completely ravaged. It's going to be destroyed. Now, it'll still exist, but not like we're used to. And I think the MLS has been a really good thing for consumers. I think that is also somewhat unique to the American real estate market. And although the claim of these plaintiffs and plaintiffs' attorneys was that the MLS enabled the price fixing, the antitrust violations. And while some of that may well be true, it also enabled data transparency and a more perfect market, because it's like the MLS. I used to always say the MLS is like the stock exchange for real estate. So what's going to happen? Here's my prediction. You're going to see a lot more industry consolidation. A lot of these big players in real estate are going to get bigger, and they're going to have their own MLS systems. And now you're going to be in a position as a buyer where you're going to go to Keller Williams for their properties. You're going to go to RE/MAX for their properties. You're going to go to Century 21, not that anyone really goes to Century 21 anymore, but you're going to go there for their properties or whatever, right? And I'm just mentioning, a few names of a few brokerages. There's many others, obviously, but they're all going to silo the properties. And now the data is going to suck. It's going to make the market more imperfect. But what is the opportunity here? For those who know what they're doing, for those of you who watch my YouTube channel and listen to my show, the market, as it becomes more imperfect, it's probably going to lead to more opportunities for people who will make the most effort and people who have the most knowledge and the most connections. So this is going to be interesting to see how this plays out. This is a big deal. This is probably the biggest result of the giant lawsuit and now the giant settlement. So we'll see, and I'll continue to report on how this plays out. Folks, I know this is like industry talk, and most of you are probably listening in 189 countries, and you're thinking, Jason, I'm not in the industry. I'm a consumer. I'm an investor. I just want to invest. But folks, this is going to have an impact on everybody. It's such a big deal. This is such a big case, and it is going to have wide-ranging impact. Now, you might be asking, how does this affect me, Jason Hartman? Well, I don't think there's too much of an effect for us. It'll have some effect, certainly, because as the industry changes, it's going to have an effect. There's no question about it. We'll see. I don't know yet. I'm wondering too. I'm not a member of the National Association of Realtors, haven't been a member for 20 years. I'm not involved in the traditional real estate industry. But of course, it all plays together, right, as one giant industry. So we'll see. I don't know. I'll continue to report on this as time goes on and we see the impact of this very, very significant thing. One more quick announcement on the cruise. The cruise is sold out, as you know. We have 4 people on the waiting list. If you want to get on the waiting list for the cruise, if there's a cancellation, talk to your investment counselor or go to jasonhartman.com, click through on the cruise. We're going to take that down in a few days, but you can just put yourself on the waiting list. So if there is a cancellation and a room comes up, we can get you one. Actually, and I take that back, it's not totally sold out. There are suites available, but they start at like $12,000, $13,000 and go up from there. Some of them are really, really expensive. Okay. So if you want a suite, we can still get you on the cruise, but no regular price rooms are left. So that's that. Talk to Celebrity Cruises, not me. I can't make the ship any bigger. So sorry for those of you who couldn't come, but I told you to register early a long time ago, right? But some wait. And remember, the early bird gets the worm. All right, let's get to part 2 of our show today, and let's talk with Bill Faeth. I think you'll find this to be a fascinating interview. Here we go. It is my pleasure to welcome Bill Faeth to the show. He is a serial entrepreneur. He's done 31 startups. He's had 19 exits. He's a prolific real estate investor and just a great guy overall. I'm sure you're going to learn a lot from this conversation today. Bill, welcome. How you doing?
I'm doing awesome. Thank you, Jason, for having me.
It's good to have you. And you are a big proponent of having a life plan when it comes to creating wealth and doing something with that wealth that actually makes an impact and makes a difference. Maybe we want to start with that, but I know we've got a lot of other things to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to start with that. I think it's one of the most important facets, especially for somebody that's a serial entrepreneur like myself. I have done 50 years old. I've done 31 startups. For most people, that's crazy talk, right? And for me, it probably was crazy talk through about the first 23, 24 startups that I did. Luckily, I started at a young age. When I was 17 in high school, I was selling t-shirts out of the back of my mom's 1984 Ford Tempo at football games. But in 2015, my life kind of changed. I was a member of EO, the Entrepreneurs Organization. I had kind of a negative forum experience, right? We had 9 people, 4 super overachievers and 5 kind of lazy underachievers. And I walked in one day, I'm like, why am I spending, 8 hours a month in this and I'm getting nothing? You guys are late. You guys don't have your financials, blah, blah, blah. And I left and dropped out and took the other 3 high achievers with me. We started our own mastermind called Spark, Jason. And we noticed that there was one flaw in the model. And that was all of us type A mixing with type B personalities trying to self-manage our own forum. So we hired a gentleman named John Bardon, who fundamentally changed my life. He taught me about the life plan. Mm-hmm. And he'd been a 2-time Fortune 500 CEO. He was an angel investor. He's about 15, 20 years older than us. And it's really very simple. He taught us that we have the ability to architect our desired outcome. But the key component, the tipping point here is if you want to have work and life commingled together, we needed to have a mindset shift that we weren't trying to separate like everybody else, right? Everything had to work together, and we had to be intentional and 100% aligned with our spouse. Mm-hmm. Every one of us 4 guys, and we added 2 to our mastermind, had tremendous relationships. Nobody was divorced. Most of us had been married for like 15 years plus. I'm now into 26 years. Never slept on the couch, never had to go to a hotel, never had a dead drag out fight with my wife. We have a great relationship. But what I found was we weren't 100% aligned. We were about 75 to 80%. And at that time, I'd done 24 startups and I was chasing money, and I'd built some $50 million companies, multiple 30 millions, like 6 or 7 of them over 10 to 15 million, and had some success. But the problem is she wanted me at home. I had a 5-year-old at that time, right? And she said something to me, Jason, that resonated for the rest of my life. I don't want you to turn into your father. And we talked about this pre-roll. We both grew up without fathers. Mine left me and my mother when I was 5. And, I always wanted to be a tremendous father. And I thought I was doing the right thing. Quadruple type A, OCD, all these traits that successful entrepreneurs like us have. But I was so focused on taking care of my family financially, I wasn't at home. I wasn't present, and her and I weren't aligned.
So the misalignment wasn't a misalignment about money goals. It was about being available and being present, right? You were chasing the money too much, right? She
said, when's enough is enough. We were multimillionaires at that time. And she's like, do we need to make $1 million, 2 million, 5 million? When's it enough? Right. And when are you going to stop and spend more time? And when you're going to be home, when are you going to put this down? Right. Stop, talking to work and whatever. And at that time I had 4 companies that were going at the exact same time. And if you do the math, my MO was to do 3 to 4 startups every single decade. Mm-hmm. Right. So at that point we realigned. John had me go through what I wanted the outcome of my life to look like. Then 2 months later, she did hers. And it's really critical that we didn't do it together because there's always an alpha, right, in the relationship, and somebody's going to comply. So we did it separately. and then we brought them together. And then that's when really the magic started happening for us. I've done less startups since 2015, and I've pretty much probably 4x'd my income while reducing my average work time from about 70 to 80 hours a week to less than 15 now.
So what's the secret on that in a nutshell? I mean, I know there's a lot to it, but
there's two big things. Number one is today when we're done, because it's 12:47 my time and it's a Wednesday. I was gone last week. I missed Faith Fridays. My social media manager branded that. She thought we were just going out and having fun on Friday afternoons. We're actually auditing our success as parents, as lovers, as best friends, business partners, everything. We have these metrics for us to audit ourselves. We typically do it on a Friday. So I got to make up for last week today. Then we'll do it again on Friday. And then we come home, and the big thing for us is we have two daughters. I've got an 18 and a 14-year-old. And we started this with them in 2017. How present were mom and dad this week? How much did you feel loved on a scale of 1 to 10? What did we do good? What did we do bad? Just basic stuff to where they were involved in our relationship and not just watching from afar, right? So that was really important for us as children, as parents. One of the big things though is this, and this is not for sale, so I'm not pitching anything. This is my success planner. I took what I learned from John, people like Brendan Bouchard that I have a strong relationship with, Grant Cardone, kind of took all how they're managing their lives, and a big influence for me was Gary Vaynerchuk. Gary manages his life Monday through Friday down to the 2-minute mark. So one of the big things for me is I learned how to set priorities, but this was a big component over here, right? So I have 3 priorities on a daily basis. And what I learned is to get rid of all the distractions. So I would set my start time. I would write down an estimated time to completion, and I would monitor my completion time. And what I found out is I wasted a lot of time with this thing and the notifications coming in on my Slack channels and all that different type of stuff. So I had to learn to block that out, turn that stuff off so I could complete my priorities, because I don't work off of like a 10 or a 20 point task list on a weekly basis. I work off of 3 priorities every single day, and I start with 1. And when I get done with number 1, then I fill in number 2. I don't even look at 2 or 3 and get distracted by it. It's this micro focus on number 1, complete. Number 2 becomes number 1, complete. Number 3 becomes number 1, complete, and so forth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Good stuff. You know, we had Cal Newport on the show, the author of Deep Work and several other books. And I think you're definitely right. We are just so distracted nowadays that the attention muscle, it's just obliterated in most of us, you know? And so we've got to go back to that. I mean, that 3-thing idea. I remember Earl Nightingale telling me that when I was 17 years old.
Right.
So you really can't get more than 3 things done in a day. More than 3.
You're 100% correct. I go back to, like you mentioned, when you were 17. When I was 19, I just dropped out of UCLA on a full ride golf scholarship to play professional golf. And there was the most renowned sports psychologist at the time. His name was Dr. Bob Rotella. And I went in and he's like, Bill, what do you think about in your pre-shot routine? Like the 30 seconds before you're going to execute, right? I said, well, I'm thinking about mechanics, setup, all this type of stuff. And there was like 9 things, and I'm going through this mental checklist. He's like, we have to pare that down to 0, because you need to rely on muscle memory and confidence as opposed to going through these checklists. So what it did is it started paring down from 9 to 7. Then he tried to get me to 3. He's all, you can only mentally process 1 thought every 10 seconds, right? Mm-hmm. So if you have a 30-second pre-shot routine, it took me like 3 to 4 years to get it to 0. And 0 was only when you were in the zone, right? And I look at the same thing in our life today. If I'm not fully entrenched with you, if I'm looking at my phone or one of my other monitors or not paying attention, then I can't give you that full attention. So I kind of applied that, what I learned through Dr. Bob, into my real estate investing, into my professional life, and probably most importantly, with my kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's talk about the angle of money and the idea of enough. And I just want to share my screen and show you something for a quick moment, because I think you're going to have some good comments on this whole idea. And this is from the book Die with Zero. And basically what it says is that at some point we've got to start spending down our wealth, because we're going to die with too much. And this is the sort of arc that he explains. Like at some point, you know, we're surviving. Then we get a little more comfortable. Then we get to the point of we can afford all the luxuries, right? But by then, we're usually so old, and it doesn't mean that old, but, you know, maybe 50, right? To where if we don't start spending down that wealth a little bit, we're not going to have the health to do it, you know, in the next couple of decades, maybe, right? There's a high chance of that. And also, if you have children, you're not going to be around to help them spend your wealth, right? This isn't about being selfish or living like a narcissist or anything like that. It's about having your money have impact while you're alive. And he talks about, why are you waiting till you're dead to give your money to your kids, right? That's one of the things he talks about. So you and your wife had this conversation about enough, right? And I just finished reading Jack Bogle's book, Enough, which is more a discussion about Wall Street and how the greed is so excessive on Wall Street. Right. But there are a lot of applications of this idea. So I just thought you might want to comment on that.
I love it. And as I told you before we got started, my oldest daughter just turned 18. She's going to become a doctor, and she's going to Belmont University for the first year of their pre-med program. And that's going to cost me $55,000 a year, right? And then probably another $3,000
a year.
What's that?
$55,000 a year. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's just for tuition, room, and books, probably another $10,000 or $15,000. But I love that graphic that you put up. So I just gave her $250,000. But to access that, she has to unlock certain things, right? So one of the things I don't want her to become is a very typical, no disrespect to physicians or doctors, but most of them are not financially literate, because they focus so much on their education to become a physician or a surgeon or whatever that is.
They're scientists, right?
100%. So I've spent probably the last 3 to 4 years of her life, and I'm just starting with my youngest daughter, who's 14, on really empowering them to become financially literate, as well as building their confidence for young women. So she has to do very specific things. And one of the things is she has to take and get A's in business courses at Belmont, which has a tremendous business school. And then we are working together. Then I will invest the money with her, not just give it to her, in a checking account or money marketing account or whatever that is.
In the real estate game, we love leverage because we can do more with less. If you're in the active side of the real estate business, like wholesaling or flipping, great software offers even more leverage because it solves problems like lead tracking, marketing, sales, and even operations. That's where our sponsor, RE Simply, comes in, like list stacking, driving for dollars, automated drip campaigns, cold calling dialer, complete phone system, email management, speed to lead, buyer management, task tracking, accounting, and so much more. This powerhouse software eliminates the need for juggling multiple subscriptions and different complicated integrations. So check out RE Simply if you want to streamline your investing business and start closing more deals. They made a special discount offer for my followers where you get 50% off your first month at resimply.com/Hartman. That's resimpli.com/Hartman. Plus, they're throwing in a 14-day free trial, so don't miss out. Take a look today.
Some of the things that you show on that graphic there are really important. I just turned I'm 50 and a half. I'll be 51 in May. I achieved what me and my wife determined financial independence at 48. So a few years ago. One of the goals for us was to do it. But here's the problem.
What's your definition of financial independence?
Financial independence for us is that we can live off of our passive income, and we have a plan to reduce our debt to zero. So that's all part of architecting our life plan. And that I have a net worth of cash liquidity that is more than what my debt is. So, and I'm an open book. I made just under $4 million last year, like 3.8 million in net income, not gross revenue. I've got a $19 million short-term rental portfolio with $3.9 million worth of debt on it. So I have a huge delta of equity there. And I just added another property last month that takes me to a run rate of my forecasted income for this year to be at $1.14 million in net income. So if you look at that,
my rental properties,
off of my rental properties, yes.
And by the way, are those all single-family homes, or do you have some hotels in there or something?
That's just my solely owned short-term rental portfolio. That doesn't include, I co-host, I have a hotels through a investment group, that type of stuff.
Just one of the, are those single families or?
Those are all single-family homes, yes, and one condo, single-family homes, and one luxury condo at Glacier National Park.
Got it. Okay.
So the 1.14 million. Tied into my life plan to where, since we've already financially free, one of our goals is to be, Dave Ramsey lives right around the corner from me, is to become debt free. So I'm trying to keep my net income off the rental properties to pay them off down to zero when my youngest daughter in 3.5 years graduates from high school. That's when me and my wife will officially retire, because now we won't have the responsibility of taking them to school and soccer and all that type of stuff once they go to college. That ties into the life plan. So I strategically reconstruct my portfolio every single year to tie to that primary goal of reducing debt down to zero. That would include our primary residence that I'm in right now. That would include the real estate portfolio. I have no credit card debt, no car debt.
Yep.
But one thing that I will do either this year or next year, depending on what happens with the tax benefits and the cost segregation study in the short-term rental loophole, it should be repealed in Congress next month. But if it's not, then I'm going to have to probably go buy an airplane, to take advantage of Section 179 to offset.
But you only
taxes.
have 60% accelerated now on that, I think.
That is correct. And that's what sucks with the cost seg. But I believe it's going to be repealed. It passed the House a couple of weeks ago, should come back, and it'll benefit all of us on the real estate side to 100% for another 5 years.
Yeah, got it. Okay, let's talk a little bit about why real estate, if we could. You picked that as a vehicle, obviously entrepreneurship too, but most of our audience is interested in real estate investing. So I just want to get your take, Bill, on real estate and why it's your thing.
So I had invested because people told me to invest at a very young age when I made some money into the stock market. And like other people, I got hurt in the stock market. I got hurt in a Ponzi scheme, actually. And from that point on, I was kind of jaded and just invested into myself. And my grandfather...
Like a Ponzi scheme by a public company?
A Ponzi scheme by a stockbroker that I played golf with 4 days a week that never asked me to invest with him, but I saw what other members of my country club were getting returns from him, and finally I did.
Yeah, it was the subtle come to me sale. Yeah.
It was like the whole Bernie Madoff thing about a year and a half before Bernie Madoff went public. But so I invested into myself, and I never really invested. My grandfather left me 2 shares of Berkshire Hathaway, which I've grown to 7 A stock. So I do invest into that. I have invested into some stock for my children, just, hold it and forget it type of stuff, not day trading Bitcoin or anything like that. I got into real estate because of the flexibility of it, because of, being able to have appreciation, the security of it, and the flexibility. And one of the reasons that I pivoted from long-term rents into short-term rents is because I could get the same amount of appreciation, but I could increase cash flow by 5 to 7x. It was all by happenstance. I owned a couple of condos in downtown Nashville where I live, and a friend of mine had started doing short-term rentals. And I'm like, well, how are you getting $8,000 a month and I'm still charging $2,600, for a 6-month lease or a 12-month lease? And that's kind of when I was introduced to it. But I knew based on what was going on in Nashville, because I had about a $10, $11 million ground transportation company. So I was in city council meetings every week battling Uber, who was trying to take over the world. And they won. They ended up doing it, right? Travis Kalanick was a brilliant CEO. But what was happening is these Airbnb bills were hitting, those same city council meetings. And it was just so volatile that I never invested into Nashville. I sold those properties and went to a place, Gulf Shores, Alabama, that had 30 years of history of regulation to where it was more insulated. And we see all these things in New York and Philadelphia, Honolulu, Dallas, or all these urban areas are cracking down on short-term rentals. So I went to the insulated markets to start investing into, and I saw very similar results. Before rolling, a lot of your guys may have heard of Mike Kalowicz. He wrote, Profit First, the Pumpkin Plan. I use a version of the Pumpkin Plan to level up my properties and what I call return on equity audits that I do every quarter on my investments, whether it's the motels, whether it's apartment buildings, whether it's single family homes. I look at the flexibility of when I'm underwriting a property, and I'm usually buying short-term rentals to make sure that it can still be positive cash flow and a sound investment on a debt service coverage ratio on a midterm rent, and even break even or be profitable on a long-term rent as well. So that way I have the fallback. And you and I kind of discussed this yesterday, that flexibility of real estate is something that we don't have in the stock market, right? You pay one price to get in, you pay another price to get out. That's it. And we're locked in. I just don't see another vehicle that is as flexible, secure as what we can get with real estate. And all 3 of those, whichever one you're comfortable with, long-term, midterm, or short-term.
Yeah. Now, excellent point. And there are so many advantages because it's a multidimensional asset class. Good stuff. Okay, so what do you think about the future of real estate? I mean, we know about the benefits of it, but there's a lot of talk, Bill, about people who are trying to time the market, everyone who thinks they can sort of outsmart the whole thing, and they just categorically just never win, these people. but it is amazing to me how the human mind just never gives up on thinking that they've got a better way and I guess that's great because, that's what creates innovation and stuff, right? But when it comes to Mr. Market, if you will, and that's the old saying they use in the stock market is Mr. Market, right? And then the random walk down Wall Street idea, and you apply those ideas to real estate as an asset class. What do you think about the next, the rest of the decade, the next 10 years? I mean,
I think there's only one time to get in, Jason, and that's today.
Yeah.
The earlier that we get into real estate, the better chance we have of making money over the long term.
Mm-hmm.
I've flipped 9 properties in my life, and they were all in 2021 in one market that was appreciating at 3 to 5% a week, to where there's no way I could make a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I think that flipping a lot of people got Jerry Norton, the flipping master. I mean, he is the flipping master. He's made a ton of money flipping, but I am here to build wealth consistently and conservatively over time. Right? And I believe that the earlier that I get in, the better off I'm going to be over a long period of time. And that's what I'm teaching my girls. That's what I teach my students. People that want to get rich quick, go day trade, go do Bitcoin, whatever it is, take those risks. I didn't have the father I talked about. I learned from my grandfather who grew up in the Great Depression. I want to be very, very conservative. A lot of people think that short-term rentals is risky, compared to midterm or LTR. It's not if you know how to mitigate your risk and go into the right markets, right? So I look at a couple of things. I look at cash flow. I look at appreciation. I look at debt pay down. Like, I would never do an interest-only loan unless I am actually going to be disciplined enough to create my own escrow account and pay down my own principal, especially if there's some type of prepayment penalty, like with a DSCR product or whatever that is. So I'm looking every single day on where I can put my money, still conservatively, but get the strongest return. Doesn't matter if it's in real estate or out. I always end up coming back to real estate. You bring up the next 10 years, Grant Cardone is singing from the rooftops that we're going to have the largest correction in the history of real estate, coming down, and that, a lot of apartment complexes and, the long-term rents are going to crash, whatever.
Certainly the office market is going to crash. It's already crashed, but
100%. Yep. And there may be opportunity for people to buy, high-rise office space in Manhattan, Chicago, Boston, these mega cities, and convert those into apartments if there's demand. But I think there's so many forms of real estate, from farmland, from the tax benefits to apartment complexes, single-family homes, beach houses, whatever it is. There's opportunity always in real estate, even in down markets. So the one thing that I do, Jason, is when I see the market going this way, I'm going in the opposite direction. When everybody's flooding into, buying apartment complexes, I'm going for boutique hotels or single family homes. When that flips, and I don't think that we will see single family homes affected for probably at least 4 or 5 years, if not longer than that. We just don't have enough inventory right now. So that's why I'm continuing to invest into single family homes. I pulled up Gulf Shores after we got done yesterday and looked at single family homes that are available between $500,000 to $1 million. There was 67 properties in the prime location and about a 4.5-mile trade radius. 67. Yeah. I called my real estate agent who's been down there.
And what you're saying is that's a low number.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Because people have to have a, they do, when you say 67, and I know that market extremely well because my mother lives there.
Right.
And, we do a lot of business in Alabama, but nobody has the point of comparison.
You're talking 27,000 homes in that market that I'm referring to. 14,500 of them are short-term rentals, and there's only 67 single-family homes. There's plenty of condos available. Right. There's like probably 1,000 condos available, but single family homes, 500,000 to $1 million. There was 67. 2019, there would be between 300 to 500 of those properties on the MLS.
Yeah, I know. It's amazing. I mean, and yet the crash bros are out in force saying the market's going to crash. We're all going to be wrong.
Wasn't it supposed to crash in 2023 when interest rates hit like 8%?
Yes, and it was supposed to crash in 2020 and 2019 and 2015, and it was supposed to crash in 2012. And, really, even through the Great Recession, people made money if they bought prudent properties. It's such a great book. I mentioned it yesterday when we talked about the psychology of money. Mm-hmm. The biggest enemy we have is not the market. It's not the anything. It's our tenacity and our own mental fortitude. In other words, when all this stuff is happening around us and all this news is coming in, can we just hold the course, right? Those are the people that just win the day. They don't make like snap decisions. Oh my God, I got to sell all my real estate. It's going down. They just sit there and they decide that this is not a capital appreciation market. It's a cash flow market. I'm just going to be a good manager. I'm going to optimize my rents. I'm going to minimize my expenses, and I'm going to keep my tenants. And they sail right through. It's
Agreed.
Everybody focuses too much on price and appreciation when they should just be focusing on the whole holistic investment, multidimensional.
I agree with you 100%. You think back into 2020 and, spring right around this time, the people that sold, based out of panic.
Yeah,
I have a great friend in Long Island. He sold half of his portfolio. It ended up costing about $260,000 because he panicked. Mm-hmm. You think about the tried and true test of real estate is, like you said, it's fortitude. It's being willing to hold on to it through those times when you might take a 10 or a 20% hit on the overall property value. If you're still cash flow positive or break even, just hold on to that sucker, right? Because at the end of the day, it's going to end up going back up. You only get hurt if you sell at the wrong time. And
just remember, like an iceberg, most of the return on investment in real estate is below the surface of the water. That's 1,000%. Where most of the iceberg is. So that debt is being debased by inflation. So it's getting cheaper to repay. Your tenant is paying down your mortgage. You're not seeing that. You're not paying attention to that, right? The mortgage is being amortized down. The debt is getting inflation-induced debt destruction. You're getting tax benefits, and your asset is probably appreciating most of the time for sure, right? And you're getting leverage. So that appreciation is magnified with the leverage, right? So if you have 5% appreciation, but you have an 80-20 loan to value ratio, you just multiply that by 5. You're getting 25% in essence appreciation.
100%.
Okay. So it's like people just don't get it. They just get too emotional and they just cut losses. Like in the stock market, stop losses make sense sometimes, right? If you have a 15% loss, you just put in a stop loss order and you stop losing money, right? You cut your losses. But with real estate, it's harder to understand your losses and gains because of that multidimensional aspect. And most people just look at the price and they think, oh, that's the whole thing. No, it's not the whole thing.
Well, it's funny that you bring that up. In my mastermind, we have a rule, and it's no stories on the purchase or the exit.
Oh,
you can't tell stories. We're going to look at the pro forma on the front end, and we're going to look at the financials on the back end, and that tells the story, because we see, like what you're talking about is people self-talk themselves into making emotional bad decisions. So we try to eliminate that. No stories, financials only.
Yeah. Good stuff. Well, Bill, anything I didn't ask you that you want to just wrap it up with and tell people where they can find you?
No, I think you've done a fantastic job. I love the conversation. They can find me at billfaeth.com. That's Bill Faeth, Faeth.com. My business is Build Short-Term Rental Wealth. I think you just joined my Facebook group. I've got about 31,000 investors in that Facebook group. It's a wealth of knowledge. And buildshorttermrentalwealth.com. Those are really kind of the three places. And unless you're on Instagram, Bill Faeth 73.
All right, Bill, thanks for joining us and happy investing.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you so much for listening. Please be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes. Be sure to check out the show's specific website and our general website, hartmanmedia.com, for appropriate disclaimers and terms of service. Remember that guest opinions are their own, and if you require specific legal or tax advice or advice in any other specialized area, please consult an appropriate professional. And we also very much appreciate you reviewing the show. Please go to iTunes or Stitcher Radio or whatever platform you're using and write a review for the show. We would very much appreciate that. And be sure to make it official and subscribe so you do not miss any episodes. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode.